All right, let's dive into something truly fascinating, and yeah, sometimes a little bizarre. The world of altered states of consciousness. We're talking about those moments when your brain just decides to shift gears, and your whole perception of reality kind of goes along for the ride. So, let's get into it.
First things first, when I say the word hypnosis, what's the first image that pops into your head? Is it some stage magician with a swinging pocket watch making an unsuspecting volunteer cluck like a chicken? Well, you're not totally wrong, but the reality of hypnosis is so much more interesting than the stage show fiction.
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll kick things off with the whole idea of the mind's other gears. Then, we're going to bust some common myths about hypnosis and check out the science behind how it might work. After that, we'll look at the chemical shortcuts to altered states, do a quick tour of psychoactive drugs, and wrap up by looking at how our own brains can cook up these experiences all by themselves.
Okay, so where did our modern idea of hypnosis even come from? For that, we got to jump in the time machine and head back to the 18th century.
I want you to meet Franz Mesmer. He was this 18th century German physician with a real flair for the dramatic. I mean, picture this guy. He wore capes, he played this eerie music on a glass harmonica, and he treated his patients by putting them into these trance-like states. His theory? He called it animal magnetism, claiming he was realigning their internal magnetic forces. Now, the scientific community at the time eventually called foul, but he had accidentally stumbled onto something huge, the power of suggestion.
What Mesmer was doing is what we now call an altered state of consciousness. It's any time you're awake and aware, but you're not in your normal everyday get-the-groceries state of mind. It's this incredible reminder that our regular waking state is just one of many settings our brain can operate in. It's got other gears, and sometimes it just shifts.
All right, let's clear the air and bust some of the biggest myths that are still floating around about hypnosis.
Okay, myth number one, the big one, is that hypnosis is some kind of mind control. The reality is way less sinister. Hypnosis is really just a super calm, focused, trance-like state where you become more open to suggestions. But, and this is the important part, a hypnotist can't make you do anything that goes against your core values. Your internal veto power is still fully operational. Here's another one you've probably seen in movies 100 times. The idea that hypnosis is like a key that can unlock a perfect video recording of your past, something that's just been buried deep inside your mind.
Yeah, that's just not how memory works at all. Our brains don't file away every single thing that happens to us. And the memories we do keep, well, they tend to change and morph over time, kind of like a story that gets tweaked with each retelling. So that idea of a perfect recall, sadly, it's pure fiction.
And get this, it turns out not everyone can even be hypnotized that easily. The research suggests that only about 20% of people are considered highly hypnotizable. You know, the kind of person who could actually be convinced that sour milk smells like a beautiful rose.
So if it's not for mind control or perfect memory recall, what's it actually good for? Well, in clinical settings, hypnosis has been used pretty effectively to help people with real-world problems. Things like reducing stress and anxiety, helping with weight loss, and even managing chronic pain.
But this all leads to the million-dollar question, right? How does this stuff actually work? And you know what? Scientists are still debating the specifics, but there are two main theories that lead the pack. So, on one side, you have the social influence theory. It suggests that subjects are basically getting caught up in playing the role of a good hypnotic subject. They're just doing what's expected of them. But on the other side, there's the disassociation theory. This one suggests hypnosis taps into our natural ability to split our consciousness. You know how you can sometimes drive a familiar route and realize you don't remember the last few miles? That's dissociation. This theory says hypnosis just harnesses that ability, letting you detach from your surroundings or even from sensations like pain. Okay, so we've talked about the power of suggestion, but what about a more direct route for altering our consciousness? Let's talk about psychoactive drugs, substances that go right to work on your brain's chemistry. Now, for some, using these substances can follow a pretty predictable pattern. First, there's the initial use and the effect it has. But with repeated use, tolerance can build, which means you need more and more to get that same feeling. That happens because of something called neuroadaptation. Your brain chemistry literally adapts to the drug's presence. And of course, that constant adjustment is what can open the door to addiction. When we talk about psychoactive drugs, they generally fall into three big categories, based on how they impact our brains and bodies.
We can basically sort these into three main families. First up, you've got depressants, which are like the brakes for your nervous system. Then you've got stimulants, which are the gas pedal. And finally, you have hallucinogens, which don't just change your speed, they change the entire landscape of your perception. Let's break those down a bit.
Let's start with depressants. The most famous one, of course, is alcohol, which the writer William S. Burroughs once called our national drug. But despite its reputation as a party starter, it doesn't actually stimulate you. It's a disinhibitor, meaning it lowers your judgment and self-control. Then you have things like opiates, morphine, heroin, which depress neural activity so much that the brain can actually stop producing its own natural painkillers. That's what makes withdrawal so incredibly brutal.
Now, for the other side of the coin, stimulants. And you know who was a huge fan back in the day? Sigmund Freud. Seriously. Back in the 1880s, he was hailing cocaine as a miracle drug. He did eventually give it up for a massive cigar habit that unfortunately led to the cancer that killed him. Stimulants like cocaine work by flooding the brain with feel-good chemicals, but that can deplete the brain's natural supply, leading to that awful crash afterwards.
So, we've seen how chemicals can hijack the brain's own systems. But here's where things get really mind-bending. You don't always need an external substance to have a profoundly altered experience. Our brains are more than capable of creating them all on their own.
That's right. Hallucinations, seeing, hearing, or feeling things that just aren't there, can be triggered by a whole range of things. A really high fever, a brain injury, total sensory deprivation, or even just extreme stress. It's an amazing illustration of just how flexible our perception of reality really is. The line between what's real and what our brain creates can get surprisingly blurry.
For example, there are tons of stories about people in extreme emergencies, like an injured skier, who report hearing a commanding voice telling them to keep going. It's a kind of auditory hallucination the brain cooks up in a crisis. Or, and this is truly wild, people who lose a sense, like their sight, can sometimes have these vivid visual hallucinations as their brain tries to fill in the blanks by pulling from old memories.
And all of this brings us to one final big idea to chew on. From hypnosis and dreams to the influence of chemicals and the brain's own strange creations, it's clear that our consciousness isn't just one fixed thing. It's this rich, complex, and constantly shifting landscape. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If our minds have all these different gears they can shift into, what exactly makes any one of them the normal one? Thanks for watching.